with this kind of intervention in this area, we intend that the requalification of the area will give more value for the region and give new opportunities for the private also to make their commerce, their new activity, economic activity, and create more employees. That's the program, and that's what we want to share with you about this experience. It's the very first project in Brazil. We have so much to learn, and we intend to create new projects as this in other cities in our state. Thank you very much for your attention.
Nonhalnaha, Chief Director, Operation Policy Frameworks, National Department of Human Settlements, South Africa. To you.
We have segregated our sector and created what we call a qualification criteria. Our qualification criteria, it focuses on different income categories. When you look at it in terms of South African rands, we are talking around a figure of about 3,500 rands, which is an equivalent of about 250,000 US dollars. Having disabilities who are living in areas where we have not been able to provide services. When we talk about inclusive housing as a country, we are not just talking about providing a home. We are providing an asset, and we are looking at defining it differently. We now talk about provision of housing opportunities. Within opportunities, we can be able to offer you a service site. We can be able to offer you a house which will be a 4-room house in line with our norms and standards. We also offer opportunities in relation to rental units. The key aspects which I think are critical in relation to the history that I've shared with you, it relates to the inclusion regarding the different programs which are supposed to be there. From the structure of my presentation, I had looked at it as part of our housing code, which will be the different programs that the country is currently having. We have a number of financial interventions for those groups which are earning up to that figure of 15,000 rand. We have a program which we call accreditation, which is around the devolution of the housing functions. The key aspect is around the area of provision of social and economic amenities, given that we have had the separate segregation that we have. But the programs which I'm interested in talking to you about, it's around the upgrading of informal settlements, which is basically around the funding that government currently gives to municipalities to undertake in situ upgrading on the existing settlements. And when we do it, we ensure that we integrate all the services and include all the social and economic amenities such as the community halls, the sports field, the taxi rank, including the child informal settlement upgrading. The manner in which we structure it, we stay in terms of doing socio-economic surveys, doing the pre-planning studies. Oftentimes we come across the challenge of geotechnical circumstances, educating communities for them to understand. Additional people will be able to educate our poor people to understand why programs such as the people housing program.
Sudhir Kumar Tiwari is the Economic Advisor, Ministry of Housing and Urban Poverty Alleviation, Government of India. To you.
Now, while viewing comparative levels of urbanization across nations, we have to remember that there is no standardized definition of what constitutes urban settlement. And in terms,
I'm doing this as a patriotic South African citizen who was lucky enough to be born in the days when the informal economies were criminalized. we are talking today, we are looking at the different strategies that government has put together, which we are currently reforming in order for us to be able to reach out to the 55 million masses, which is part of our population. What is key for me is around the fact that we as a country, we accept informal economy as a way of life. We are looking at the fact that we have a high rate of unemployment, currently sitting at about 36%, and we are viewing that as a mechanism, though it's a challenge for some, but it's an opportunity for government to be able to provide the relevant services. What we are dealing with currently, it's a situation that we inherited from our past. For some of you who don't fully understand our history as South Africa, we had a sort of what we call it's a separate development. From the diagram that I've shown on up there, it's around the segregation in terms of the different racial groups that we had. The yellow part, it denotes the areas which were earmarked for white population. The brown part, it denotes the areas that were earmarked for the colored people. The red part is the areas which was earmarked for people of African origin. The key aspects regarding this is the buffer zones which were created, and those buffer zones is what we are currently battling with as a country, because within those buffer zones it's where you will find some of the informal settlements. When decisions were made and South Africa regained its position in terms of having liberation, we had to develop a plethora of legislation. The program director has spoken about the social housing legislation, which is the Social Housing Act, but it's not only the Social Housing Acts that we are currently utilizing. We have a number of legislation emanating from our constitution, which covers the Bill of Rights. And to us, housing, we look at it as a right. And when we provide it, we look at the available means. And what we have been able to provide currently is a total of around 4.3 million housing opportunities. Funding. Then in terms of the question of dealing with the politically, is saying we are transforming the South African towns, developing
decentralized analysis which conveys the real picture. Now this slide only shows the diversity across the length and breadth at the subnational level. The range is sharply pronounced, and there will be further differentiation as we go further at the sub-state or the sub-district level. The topography, the culture, language, dialects, and in some cases even the basic administrative structure would reveal a marked variation. Now, we are a sovereign democratic republic, and the powers to legislate on various matters are specifically enumerated in the list. The only point of reference for us is that land is in the state list on which the provincial governments have the authority to legislate. Economic and social planning and social security, this along, and the social insurance and employment, which is also a point of our concern. These have concurrent jurisdiction. And this 74th Amendment Act, this has incorporated specific provisions regarding the devolution of powers and responsibilities to the urban local body. Now more specifically, town planning, urban poverty alleviation and slum upgradation. These have been entrusted specifically to the urban local body. The mechanism of finance commission, this is again a unique feature in our constitution, whereby the finance commission reviews the state of finances and the deficits of the union government, state governments and the urban local bodies, and recommend appropriate devolution, the divisible pool and the other grants which are admissible. Now in this background and framework, we come to the ministry which I represent. This ministry was constituted in 2006, subsequent to bifurcation of the erstwhile unified ministry, which was the Ministry of Urban Development, and in its various nomenclature. Now the need for a separate ministry with independent allocation of business, this was felt in the wake of the emerging phenomenon of urban poverty, which it was realized that it is not merely an extension of rural poverty, but it has its own features. It was acknowledged that urban areas pose different sorts of vulnerabilities in terms of, in standard literature, what is called occupational, residential, or social vulnerabilities. And another thing was that it was specifically recognized that in urban areas, the housing has very specific multiplier effect. In terms of the investment in housing on GDP and employment, there are also, in fact, a recent study confirmed this. Now, a technical advisory group constituted by the Government of India, it estimated that this is the housing shortage, and this housing shortage is a normative projection across these various categories. Now, alongside formation of the Ministry of Housing, a massive program of reform-driven urban renewal was launched. I think the chair would have a very deep insight into it. He was associated with that. And learning from those past experiences, presently the Prime Minister's Awas Yojana, Housing for All Urban Mission, has been launched, which is the commitment of the government to provide housing for all in urban areas by 2020. Now, these are the various verticals under which financing is provided. It has a specific component for slum redevelopment, affordable housing, and subsidy for beneficiaries and individual construction. Now, coming to the issue of livelihood, this is another major mission which focuses on urban poverty, and here we have to be mindful that urban poverty cannot be resolved by a single ministry. So it will be a consolidated outcome of interventions across ministries, across sectors, and across various institutions which are involved in this. The only specific interventions through this mission are focused on the support to urban street vendors and the shelter for urban homeless. A specific part of this funding is provided to the state governments to take up these activities. Now, these are some of the relevant policies and legislations and goals with which the ministry is associated. The Urban Housing and Habitat Policy provides a very overarching framework under which the various rental housing policy or model tenancy or even ease of doing business, these sort of initiatives are in process. Street Vendors Act, it provides a legislative framework to ensure that the street vendors carry on their trade in a fair manner, that they have assigned vending zones and they are not harassed or they have to face any inconvenience in carrying on their trade.
So within that context, within that value chain, there are opportunities to value chain. When we do feasibility, we are looking at the areas where the settlements are currently located. Within that, we are able to identify.
India would, however, be predominantly rural still. Now, as I said, we are still predominantly rural. The salient aspect of this slide is that the intercensal decadal variation during 2001 to 2011, which revealed that in the urban areas, the increase in population exceeded the increase in population in the rural areas, although very marginally. But it just signifies the reversal of the historical trend. And another significant aspect was that the increase in the number of census towns, it increased phenomenally as compared to the increase in statutory towns. And here it has to be remembered in the context in which we are discussing that it is only the statutory towns which possess the essentials of municipal governance. And